Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. Today, I'm very happy to have with me author Carol Saller, who's the author of several books for children, including the middle grade historical novel Eddie's War, which has received a number of honors. Carol's day job was a copywriter and contributing editor to the Chicago Manual Style. As the author of the adult nonfiction title The Subversive Copy Editor, Carol frequently speaks at editing and writing conferences. She lives in Chicago. Carol, so happy to have you here, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I'm so excited to have you. You're an expert in your field, and I'm very humbled by your experience. So, thank you so much for coming here. So, on this podcast we talk about writing, we talk about reading, we talk about publishing. So, I have a lot of questions for you. So, the first one is, what is the number one mistake writers make when they submit their manuscript?
Number one. I think the number one mistake is not researching what the publisher's guidelines are, because you can read all the advice you want online about how to set up your manuscript or what to say in your cover letter or whatever else. But if you don't read what that particular editor or that particular agent that you're submitting to wants, they will know that immediately and they'll feel disrespected. And that just, puts you a little behind other people who have supplied what was requested. So these days, editors and agents are overwhelmed with submissions, and they have to go through hundreds and hundreds of them every month, and they're making very quick decisions about whether they want to work with someone or not, or request more pages to read. And I mean, unless, usually they have a lot of good manuscripts to choose from. So why wouldn't they go with the one who looks professional and looks like they did their homework?
Mm-hmm. So you don't think it's grammar and the way they, constructed their sentences is not the number one turn off?
Well, I think a lot of agents and editors won't even get into the manuscript if they see that, they ask people not to send attachments and someone send an attachment. They just won't even open it. So, okay. Yeah, I think, and then when you talk about the actual writing issues, like what's the number one writing issue rather than submission issue, I think that, some grammar in fiction, sometimes bad grammar is part of the deal. Yeah. It's on purpose. Yeah. So that's not an immediate judgment that the book is bad. And also, if something is a really good story, but the author needs help cleaning up the grammar, that's what copy editors do. Okay. So it depends on the level of transgression that an agent or editor looking at something that's a really hot sounding property, okay, but the writer needs help, they can get that writer some help. So, okay. But I still would always advise a writer who is not confident of their grammar to get help with that before they submit.
So talking about rejection, we always tell authors, you're gonna get rejected a lot, and don't take it personally. It's part of the gig. But do you think there's a cap to the number of rejections where you think like, this is not for me? Like if you get rejected like 100, 200, like 1,000 times, is there like a sign that, maybe you should pick up something else, or you don't believe in that?
Oh, Natasha, you stab me in the heart with this question, because that is exactly where I am right now in my own submitting. I lie awake at night wondering, how many times am I going to get rejected before I throw this in the garbage?
Okay.
I'm telling you, I'm almost ready to cry.
No, don't. Please.
And that question I would kill to know what's the magic number. The number I see online all the time is 100. You know,
Okay.
to not to quit when you reach 100, but not to give up until you reach 100. And I'll tell you what I think about that, because I have obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it. Um, I think that the reason, well, and before I explain why I think that's a good number, I attended a webinar recently called Rejection, and it was very helpful because it consisted of a panel of highly successful writers who told how many times their work had been rejected and how many times they submit. And it was just shocking. They have, you know, their work was rejected dozens and dozens of times before they found an agent, or a publisher, and they also are constantly submitting, like at least once a week they send something out. So that made me realize that even though the work I'm trying to sell right now has been rejected 30 times,
Mm-hmm.
and that's over a period of probably 3 years, which means I only send it out 10 times a year. That's less than once a month. And this other writer was sending hers out every week. So I think I haven't tried hard enough yet, even though 30 rejections is really hard on a person. So the reason I think that the more you submit, the better chance you have has nothing to do with the number of times itself. It has to do with how much you revise and improve your query between submissions. And after you keep improving and improving and improving, that's what makes the magic, not just sending it to enough people that you finally find something that sticks. So I do that. And when you wait, when you wait a month between submissions, that gives it time to sit. I think there's some value in that, actually. It gives the query letter time to sit so that when you open it again, it's like you're reading it for the first time through fresh eyes, and all these things leap out at you that you could improve.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think I have a killer query letter, but my fear is that I'm not really writing something that's marketable right now, and it's not attractive. No matter how good it is, it's in a genre that is not hot. So I really don't know what to do about that. I think, well, maybe I should put it in a drawer and work on something else and see if that type of thing, if the demand for that type of thing revives, or I don't know.
So this actually takes me to the second question, which is, why should we as authors and writers bother with the gatekeepers anymore? Why don't we do it on our own? And I'll give you examples. Like prolific writer Seth Godin say, pick yourself. Like, why don't we pick ourselves and just self-publish? And especially now, we're like this, the term of like the great resignation, where everyone is quitting their jobs where they work for like a manager or an employer and do their own thing. And what you said about your genre is not like kind of marketable enough at the time, and we're always gonna be behold to what the market wants, and until when we're gonna be accepting those terms. And I've been talking with a lot of authors lately, and a number of them here in the US told me that they switched to self-publishing. They were traditionally published first, and then they switched to self-publishing because they're simply making more money. And there's more technology, more platforms now, like Amazon KDP and others. So the idea of like vanity publishing or the stigma around self-publishing is almost gone. So why do we even like torture ourselves with this really difficult process of being picked by a gatekeeper who's gonna not judge us on our talent, but on what the market wants.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I think it's wonderful that writers have self-publishing as an option now. And I think it absolutely is true that depending on what genre you publish in and what kind of platform you have, you can actually make money doing that. I would the issue, for instance, in my case, middle grade fiction does not do well when it's self-published.
Why is that?
Well, because especially if you're writing literary, which is what I do, historical fiction, you need to sell books in that genre. You really need to sell to teachers and librarians, and to sell to them, you need to be reviewed in the traditional review journals that they use to justify their expenses. A book bought by a public school has to have so many reviews from School Library Journal or Hornbook or whatever. It's the system is set up, and because there are lots of people who publish children's books independently, but they're not accepted into the review journals. And it's not because they're of lower quality necessarily. In the beginning, I think they were, but now, as you have pointed out, there's really no stigma to self-publishing. But the people who review, if they have 20,000 new books a year and they can only review, a few of them, they have to have some arbitrary way of choosing which ones to consider. They cannot read them all. And so they've just arbitrarily said, well, we're just going to review traditional publishing. That's starting to change. Some of them do have indie corner or, whatever. But for picture books too, very hard to do independently because the costs are so high to produce them in color and to print them that you have to charge a lot. And a lot of picture books, you can sell ebook picture books, but the main market is still print for that. So that's a little difficult. It's difficult to get really professional illustration at a price that an independent author can afford. So a traditional publisher is going to do that for you, which is great. And a traditional publisher for middle grade is going to, be recognized by all those review journals. They're going to consider your book for a review. But if you write romance or fantasy or YA, those authors are killing it online, and doing just digital or print on demand.
Yeah.
Hardcover and paperbacks. They can do box sets. They set their own prices. It's really a very viable option. And if you don't feel like you can handle the tech part of it yourself, there are many, many, many companies who are glad to take your money to do it for you. There are unfortunately a lot of scams in that area. You have to do your homework and be very careful who you hook up with if you when you hire services, editing, production, art, all of that kind of thing. Conversion to the digital formats. You should just go with a known entity rather than some fly-by-night. And it's not hard to find out online, to get recommendations from friends who've already done it, or to investigate companies that you're looking into just by typing name of company complaints into Google.
Yeah. Well, now you raise a very good point. Maybe the review system is flawed now, and it favors traditionally published, and maybe it's time for like some sort of like a renaissance when it comes to book reviews, because even like big newspapers would not accept reviews from self-published author. Like, would the Washington Post review a self-published author, or the New York Times, or I don't know. Maybe it's time we like speak up for the self-published authors and say like it's time to think of them as legitimate authors that are deserving of a review in major publications.
Well, I do think they have many review outlets. I think what you say has been said years ago, and there are a million places online to get reviews of indie books, and they have a lot of opportunities for advertising and other. They don't have trouble reaching authors, but I will say there are some barriers. I think anyone who publishes a single book online, unless you're a celebrity or an expert, like, say you're a veterinarian and you're publishing a book on dog care or puppy raising or something, you have a sort of credential.
Okay.
Or you're a celebrity, or you have or you have a big social media following already for some reason. Unless you have all of that, if you just publish one quiet book, you're going to have trouble making money on that book because you don't have a way to put it out there. And sending it to contests. There are a lot of contests, award contests for indie writers. You're going to really need a boost somewhere. Another thing is, another way that indie authors build an audience is to write a series. It's very important to have a series of books if you're going to be marketing them on Facebook or Amazon or wherever you choose to market your books, because there's a well-established financial funnel for publishing a series and offering the first book for free or for 99 cents, and then gaining a fan, a reader who is eager for the next book, and then upping the price of each subsequent book so that your costs and your revenues are spread over the whole series, and you can really make a lot of money doing that. But to have, if you write something literary, something quiet, and it's just a one-off, or if you write some nonfiction like a memoir, or or something about your daughter who is disabled or something like that, there are thousands and thousands of books out there that are similar, and unless yours stands out in some way because of who you are or what kind of contacts and followers you already have online, you're going to have a real struggle marketing that book. And another factor is whether you know how to do that marketing, whether you know how to buy a BookBub, how to make a BookBub bid, or how to get traction on Goodreads, or how to start an Instagram account, or put up a website. All of those things, do a newsletter, write a blog. Writers are told to do all those things, and frankly, it's just exhausting.
Tell me about it. Yeah. So, okay. So I want to go back to the topic of technology, and there's a number of AI tools, artificial intelligence tools that are popping up that authors and writers and journalists are using. And I'm going to start with the copywriting tools, and I'm going to talk about other tools. So one of the most popular one is Grammarly. Another one is Hemingway. And so there's a number of these robots that fix your grammar and your sentence structures. So do you think we're reaching a stage where copywriters are going to be out of a job, since everyone is using them, and they become so good in the future that, I don't know, maybe copywriters would be out of a job soon?
Yeah. Well, first I have to make a distinction here between copywriters, which is actually people who write ad copy.
Yeah, I mean copywriters and copy editors.
Copy editors is what we're talking about, because that's a completely different, even though they sound the same, they are totally different professions. Copywriters are marketers.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Copy editors are people who read your manuscript and correct the grammar and the spelling, and they might even do more. they might do some rewriting if you hire them for that, and if that's part of what they do. And yes, I do think that in future AI will become good enough to do that, but I think we're very far away from that still. Like Grammarly is just, if you ask any professional copy editor, or even many writers who use it, it's a disaster for writers. It's almost unusable because it flags thousands and thousands of issues, and I would add, of which very few of them are actually issues.
Okay.
So to use it is so unwieldy if you stop on every single thing that it says is a problem. It also makes completely erroneous suggestions. You can have a perfectly good sentence and it will suggest that you change it to something that's wrong. Okay. And I have a file with hilarious examples of this. In Microsoft Word, it's the same thing. These tools are very powerful and there's great potential for them. But the problem with these tools is that, unlike a human, they don't understand the context of anything. They don't understand the words that surround the word they're stopping on. So, for instance, and I should add that if you know how to go into the options and make 1 million customizations, you can customize these tools to do better for you. But if you just take it out of the box, it's going to drive you nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, customization is one way I use these tools, and they make them better. But I don't know. I keep thinking that they're pretty close. I don't know, but you're the expert here,
Yeah, no.
No, okay.
Not even close. I'll tell you what, one that is close, it's called Perfected. Okay. And but it's not really for use by writers. I'd say it's a professional copy editing tool, and it does consider context. It's much more sophisticated than anything that's available right now. It's available to anyone who wants it, but I think it's overkill for most writers. To the startup costs of learning it and using it are probably not very practical. But and that's tools like Perfected give me hope. Well, I don't know whether I hope that copy editors will be out of a job, but they make me believe that the tools are improving. And in future, writers will also be out of a job. The same AI is just going to write the books and edit it, and so there's probably no future for writers or editors.
There's no future for us. The robots are taking over. But so what about other tools that help you structure the book, like Scrivener? I spoke with an author that she said the way when she used Scrivener, it helped her crank out books pretty quickly. Just a disclaimer, no one is sponsoring this podcast. I'm not being paid to promote any of these tools. So Scrivener, for example, she said she would just create these notes, different notes, and she would put she would write different scenes on each note, and then she will compile the scenes at the end, and she will have a book. And and this, like the idea that we had in the past of this author in a cabin in the woods alone, spending days alone trying to come up typing on a typewriter. Now we have all these tools that you can just crank scenes here and there, and the machine will compile them for them, and voila, you have a novel that is, people are buying it on Kindle, and you're making a living. So what does the future hold for this kind of formatting?
Yeah, Scrivener is great. I used it to draft one novel, and I didn't I didn't use it again because it's for a particular kind of person and it's very popular. I think it's brilliant. This and that bulletin board thing that you described is only one way to use Scrivener and
Okay.
Scrivener, sorry. And I knew that wasn't for me at all. So I didn't use it, but many people just love that feature. So that's very powerful. And there's nothing like that in Microsoft Word. Um, it, but it has a lot of other features that I liked a lot. What I found in the drawbacks of Scrivener. Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm a power user of Microsoft Word because in publishing, that's the only choice. So
Okay.
for my whole lifetime in editing, I've become very adept at that. And Microsoft Word actually does everything Scrivener does, but people don't know how to do
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So that was less incentive for me to switch over to Scrivener. Because the drawback of Scrivener, its brilliance is in its drafting and writing tools, but it has no copy editing tools and it has no publishing tools. So you have to, in the end, you have to export it to Microsoft Word or to a PDF or something else in order to go through the publishing process. It's just for writing and it does that really well. And I would suggest that anyone who hates Word or doesn't, I mean, you do have to buy Scrivener, although the trial is generous enough that you could get a lot done just on
Yeah.
the free trial,
Yeah.
probably in
Yeah.
Scrivener. But I would suggest that you look at some tutorials at YouTube or whatever, because it's not exactly intuitive. There's a struggle to get going on it. And it's well worth your time to just sit back and watch one of those, get a 30-minute or an hour-long tutorial and watch it twice if you really think you want to switch to something like that so that you're more comfortable and not so frustrated trying to get it set up.
Yeah. 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 I have the paid version, and I used it to come up with my second novel, which I put aside because I'm doing other stuff. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm like an optimist by nature. You would be surprised for someone like who grew up in the Middle East, and I'm still an optimist somehow. And so I'm like very optimistic about the future of being your own publisher, being your own copy editor, being your own solo entrepreneur, or like they call them, solopreneur these days. And I think that kind of levels the competition, and gives people better chance at publishing. So yeah, I might be naive, but I remain optimistic about the future of self-publishing and doing it your own. So what is the current status of publishing now, especially among the big five? Like or are they the big four now? Because I think they're the big four in mostly in New York. Where is it headed, and is the future still bright? Or I mean, I want to like know what is going on with this from an expert like you.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I'm not at all plugged in to the big four or five. I've spent my career in academic publishing, and
Okay.
I've never been savvy when it comes to that commercial trade publishing. I read Jane Friedman's hot sheet, but I usually skip over the sections that talk about what's going on among the wheelers and dealers. So I'm sorry, you can cut this part of the podcast if you
No,
want.
it's fine.
I got nothing.
No, but it's interesting. I mean, it doesn't have to be like an expert opinion, but it can be just some observation. I mean, I have my observations as well. But I'm just curious to see if you through the years you observed their choices of editors of authors to pick? Are they still betting on like the Stephen Kings of the world, or are they um experimenting with new authors? Just
Yeah,
observations. Like,
that I definitely can tell you, yes, they are experimenting with new authors. They're still bidding high on the Stephen Kings of the world, but yeah, this last couple of years, the shame they've felt over the lack of diversity, because there's so many repressed voices that haven't been heard, and it's a nice antidote to the influx of, you're optimistic about self-publishing. I am too. I'm very high on it for certain kinds of publishing, but I also have seen how it lets in the dregs. I mean, it does let in anything.
yeah,
There's no quality control at all. So in that way, I don't see that as necessarily a good thing. And I think that the more quality books that are published, not to say that everything published by the big trade publishers is quality, that's far from the truth, but there is at least a process where the books get looked at by many readers. They get a lot of feedback, they go through beta reading, they go through copy editing, developmental editing, proofreading. There are some standards that and now that it's opening up to a broader mix of professional writers, that standard is going up. And I think that's a good thing for readers, and it's a good thing for the whole state of mind of writers when they, if I mean, every writer should be a reader.
yeah,
If you're writing something and you're only reading your own stuff or the stuff your friends write, I don't think you're living the best writer's life, and
yeah,
that you're developing your goals as a writer if you don't read the best literature in your field. To me, that's part of the training of being a writer.
yeah.
And so this is going to raise all boats, to have so many new voices writing excellent literature. It has to be good for publishing as a whole.
Yeah. I wonder, like you mentioned, the sales. I wonder if of the sales of, like immigrant writers or non-white writers are actually doing well. Because like sometimes I would hear from, let's say, like mainstream readers, like they're turned off by like foreign food in the books or the foreign pronunciation, like even like anything, whether it's like a Russian name or like a Filipino name or food they're not familiar with. And some people are not comfortable with the unknown. And I'm wondering if this the mainstream reader has changed, or they still would like find books that they're comfortable with, that they know the environment, that they don't have to kind of squeeze their mind to to understand this foreign food or foreign language, or how to pronounce a Russian name or an Arab name or a Filipino name or something like that. I'm just curious to see how those books are selling among the mainstream.
I think there are always going to be people exactly as you described. But when you think of it, think of fantasy readers. Everything in a fantasy book is completely foreign. The language, the names, I have to say that is more challenging to me than reading a book, written by someone in Russia.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
So I think mainstream readers have embraced some very weird stuff. So if
It's in
they're,
fantasy, especially.
yeah, I think it's more likely that just pure blind prejudice would get in their way than any real difficulty in
Yeah, that's a very good
others.
point. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good answer. I like that. So, okay. What are your plans now for the future? You mentioned you're trying to sell one book, but what is Carol doing these days? What does the future hold?
Well, I have chosen, after a long slump, I have to say, I have 3 books I'm trying to sell. I have 3
Wow.
finished middle grade novels that I just can't get an agent.
Okay.
And I may consider self-publishing regardless of, the dim prospects for that. But for now, I haven't given up on finding an agent. Last week, I sent out 4 queries, and the first one came back within 15 minutes, rejection form
Mhm.
letter. I
Yeah.
mean, I have to say, there are bad weeks, and all the rest came back within 3 days. No, 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 no.
Once I got a rejection in 2 minutes, I think.
Oh,
That was my fastest one.
oh my gosh, I know. You picture the editor saying, "Get it off me, get it off me," just flinging it back.
No, the answer was like 3 words, not for us. That
Oh,
was it.
oh,
That was it. No hi, no hellos, nothing. Not for us.
oh my gosh. But so I have stopped writing, and that makes me sad because I feel like I I'm not motivated to keep writing when I can't sell my work. So there's no plan B. This was my plan for retirement, to return to children's books. I have published several children's books in the past, but the last one was 10 years ago, and then I segued to writing for adults, and I can't get my foot back in the door of children. So I don't have a plan B. I'm going to, when the pandemic, finally really opens things up again, I'd like to return to a lot of the volunteer work that I was doing. And
Mm.
I think right now it's a transition for me, kind of an empty time when I don't have enough. I'm not doing enough work that makes me feel good about being in the world and justifying my existence. So
Well, maybe you can start another book. There's always, I get like reinvigorated when I start a new manuscript. Not like I wrote a lot of manuscripts, but just fresh
we
start.
should make a pact.
Yeah, okay, let's do that because I've been slacking. Uh,
Well, I'll tell you one plan that I have been working on. I plan to start a newsletter, and this
hmm,
is the optimistic part. I think, when I do sell those books, I'll want my newsletter to be in place. And so I've started doing a lot of the tech work involved in setting up a mailing list, which I already have through my adult work, but I don't expect many of those people to stay on board when I switch my focus from helping. My adult work has all been in helping copy editors, helping editors, giving advice to editors.
yeah.
In the last 3 years, I transitioned to blogging advice to creative writers,
Hmm,
but a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people still see me as a celebrity copy editor
okay.
from my book, The Subversive Copy Editor. That's where I get all my invitations to
Okay.
speak and whatever. So now I'm transitioning. I've changed my social media from the Subversive Copy Editor to writer, editor, helper,
Hmm.
to try to emphasize more that I have things to say to creative writers. And my newsletter will focus on helping creative writers format their manuscripts, clean up their style and grammar, and it'll just be helpful advice, and it might feature children's books.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing I mean, if you're interested, is like teaching an online course. These are pretty popular these days. I'm running my own cohort next month, but it's about journalism and how to get published in newspapers. And yeah, I mean that's something that I don't see many authors doing as like you run your online cohort. And now like it's called the knowledge economy, where someone, a veteran like you can actually sell your knowledge through an online course. But that's probably a conversation for another time.
Yeah, I've thought about it.
Yeah. So before we conclude, what are like your top advice for, maybe that's a cliche question, but I always like to ask it because everyone has different advice. What are like your like top tips or advice to aspiring authors who want to get published, let's say traditionally? Let's choose the most difficult route. what what
Okay.
would what would be your like top advice?
Yeah. Well, my first advice is to read lots of books of the type you want to write. There's no better training, I think, than getting into your head the conventions and the rhythms and the expectations of readers in that genre, so that you're pretty solid. If you want to write mysteries, if you want to write thrillers, if you want to write picture books, don't especially if you want to write for children, do not rely on your memory of children's books that you loved, because everything has changed. Everything is better now for children, and you have to go to your library and read. Just sit all afternoon and ask the librarian, what are the best children's books right now, and read them, and you'll see, and you'll be delighted. And that will help shape your ambition for what you're going to write. And you won't have to ask questions. I mean, some of the questions I see on Facebook really do reveal that the writer has not read a book in the field that they're trying to write in. So that's first. Second is to read stuff online. Like my top recommendations for who to follow online is to go to the website of Jane Friedman. She has lots of blog posts like, so you want to publish a book, start here.
Yeah, she's amazing. I follow her stuff. Yeah.
And she covers traditional and indie publishing. Joanna Penn, Penn, also has a ton of advice for indie publishers. That's her specialty. And she has a podcast, and she's fun to listen to. And both of them give away tons of, like, you don't have to buy their advice. They just give away tons of advice. They also do webinars and all kinds of courses that you can take. But like, I wouldn't pay for anything until I've exhausted all of the free stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I know Jane Friedman. I'm familiar with her work. She's amazing. I think she has a book called, is it The Business of Being Published?
We published that at the the University of Chicago Press, where I worked for many years. That's one of our books. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Her book and my book are in the same series.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, so any final thoughts, comments, before we conclude? I mean, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I mean, I can chat for another hour.
I can tell. You're the best. You really are a good interviewer, because I have not referred to my notes once.
Okay. Is that good or bad?
It's good, because there are different styles of doing podcasts, and so far the podcasts I've done, on you send some topics of things you're willing to discuss, and other interviewers have just read me back my own questions, which then prompts me to refer to my notes to give the answer. So it's very canned and kind of not very natural. So this was a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I like to, and for anyone who's listening, I just like to have a conversation. Like we're chatting over coffee, and just two book lovers chatting. So thank you very much. You kind of fired me up now, and I want to go back to my manuscript. And I wish you the best of luck with the manuscripts. I'm sure they're gonna sell. It's, as we know, it's part of the gig. And definitely let's stay in touch. And for anyone who's reading, who's watching or listening, thank you very much for listening or watching another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. And until we meet again, and thank you very much.